Hello everybody, it's me, GamePagan21, and today we're going to be doing something inspired by Moment of Sanity's collaboration with me as well, the Weird Ads sequel, if you will. Not really, but this is more of just a top 10 list that I wanted to look at because I just think it'd be interesting to make a video like this in an effort to make more high effort, longer form content on this channel, just so I'm not spouting a bunch of just salt everywhere, even though that's going to still be my bread and butter. I still wanted to talk about this because, quite honestly, this is an interesting topic in general. Overall, what am I talking about today? Well, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 dumb things developers and CEOs have said throughout the gaming industry. Now, this is not necessarily going to be everything, as again, if I were to cover all of the stupid stuff, this video would take 5 ever to make. So I'm just going to be scrimming it down to top 10 of the ones that I personally feel are the ones that are the most impactful. Now, of course, this is all subject to just being my opinion, and these are not necessarily ranked in any particular order, but we will technically get worse as we go on, depending on how things go about it. Now, I'm not going to be including apologies in this, because that should be a different list entirely, and I don't know enough about the apologies in general to really talk about that, but I'm more or less going to be talking about quotes and stuff for games, CEOs, and like other sorts of gaming entities in the gaming industry, and what they happen to say, and why those things were stupid in retrospect. Overall, this list, it doesn't necessarily have many rules to it, but the 3 main ones are going to be as follows. Number 1, it has to have been said by someone higher up than normal on the standard totem pole, I guess. Now, I'm going to include this rule because I want this to be mainly people who are within the industry or have been in the industry for a while, or quote-unquote business people. And again, this in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be the highest authority at the company, i.e. CEOs and stuff like that, though most of them will be. There are going to be a couple of developers and lower tier people on this, but they're going to be important people that created or made statements that are just seen as dumb to some people. Number 2, there is only going to be, it's only going to be on this list if that person is, if that statement itself was either deemed as false, false promises, or were just seen as very dumb in retrospect. It basically didn't age well, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. It aged like milk, if you were. And lastly, number 3, it's going to only be 1 quote per company, as when I made the entirety of the list and listed out all the quotes that I wanted to put into this list, I got a few I got several from like one source, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to bring this from everyone is stupid, because there is a lot of stupid shit that is out there on the internet. So only 1 is going to be per game studio development or otherwise. With all that being said, I guess let's get started with this top 10 video. There will also be honorable mentions just because there's a lot on this list, but we're going to go through these as much as possible. Okay, starting of course off with number 10. Buy the PS5 for the exclusive sequels.
On the live service side, we are releasing our titles simultaneously, so day and date, on PlayStation 5 and PC. But with our tentpole titles, our single-player and narrative-driven titles that are, as you saw in the presentation, the backbone of what PlayStation Studios has delivered in recent years and in our history, we take a more strategic approach, and we introduce our great franchises to new audiences. And we're finding new audiences that are potentially going to be very interested in playing, for example, sequels on the PlayStation platform.
Ah, yes. This one is quite new, but also quite scathing, from the PlayStation executive himself deciding to talk about why specifically they would want to talk about the actual exclusive titles and why they were porting it over to PC. In an interview, the main man at Sony, I don't remember his specific name, had this to say when he was talking about the PC ports. Quote, "Indeed, we are bringing titles to the PC platform, and we have a dual approach here. We're finding new audiences that are potentially going to be very interested in playing sequels on the PlayStation platform. The statement was made just either weeks or even a month just before God of War Ragnarok was set to be even just announced or was set to be released on PC. This is also including the fact that most of the sequels now, such as The Last of Us Part 2, which it will be releasing within the next, I believe, month, as well as several other games that were sequels to games that were released initially as PlayStation exclusives have also found their way to the PC. All of these games now being available not only for PC, but some of them even being available to be played on the Steam Deck, making them Steam Deck compatible. And I know this because Spider-Man, at least the first one, Spider-Man Remastered, had its own native motion support on the actual Steam Deck that was supported by the developers and Sony. So, yeah. I just find it interesting here how he says, oh yes, we are going to be releasing all these games on the PlayStation and exclusively, so that way we can have them come over to ours for the PlayStation exclusives. Now, this isn't necessarily, again, a bad business strategy. In fact, it might be a very good business strategy. They realize that, yeah, they're not going to capture the entire market just by having the exclusives, because if they already wanted those exclusives, they would already be on the platform. So they are not only reaching new audiences, but maybe converting them. I find this thing stupid just because of the timing of when this was, because it was said just weeks before a sequel to a very popular game that sold really well, and also that previous game, God of War, I think won Game of the Year. I just find it funny how he said this, like, yes, the sequels are not going to be coming for a while, or he seemed to imply that, and then just happened to have the sequel come onto the PC platform anyway. I honestly don't really care too much. I just find it dumb, but this generated a lot of PlayStation salt, hence why it's at number 10. It didn't necessarily destroy the company or anything. It was just a stupid thing that someone said one time. Number 9. We don't hire white people. Validate.
Who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team.
This one's a weird one, but I wanted to include it because, well, it seems to be admitting to racist hiring practices, at least kind of. I'm not sure of the validity of this statement, but this was pulled from an interview by Danny Lalanders? I'm sorry if I butchered your name, Danny, but she seemed to have been very big on the whole thing with Validate. Validate being a dating simulator with a lot of very diverse cast of peoples, with really only one white dude, but I mean, again, diverse cast as you were. The game didn't really do well, despite the fact that they supposedly had 21 amazing, happy devs to work on this thing, a, quote, very large sum of devs to have for an indie studio, which I guess is correct, because certain games can actually be developed by one singular person, which is weird. Overall, this statement to me didn't make too much sense, and in a lot of respects seems rather illegal in some cases, because you're not allowed to do that based on racist hiring practices. Again, maybe not, but to even just quote her, she said that she said that to, quote, white people may think that something is okay, but it was really a microaggression. If you really want to look at the clip, here it is, because this is what she ended up saying.
And I'm not saying that white people in the industry are creating unsafe environments. I'm not saying that. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something may be okay, but it was really a microaggression. And no one wants to deal with that while you're trying to make a game that they love.
The clip cited through the internet during the whole Sweet Baby Inc. controversy. However, this is only tangentially correlated to Sweet Baby Inc., as she was supposedly a previous person who worked within the company. We'll come back to them in a little bit, but just note that I'm only going to be including this one as this was made separate from the actual Sweet Baby Inc. company, so it technically counts following my rules. So, yeah. Number 8. It just works. Bethesda.
All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Oh yes, this one I have more personal reasons for putting on this list. It just works is a phrase that was said by the Lord God Howard himself during the Fallout 4 presentation. It Just Works was one of those things that was made into such a big meme that there's even a song by the Chalk Eaters that is made using that same phrase. This phrase I put on here because it forever tainted the phrase for me, so that's why it goes above actually making a kind of racist statement. Even though those severities are a little bit, indifferent from one another. This one's more, again, a personal thing. You could probably just switch 8 and 9 around if you really care too much, but this one didn't necessarily break or kill anything Fallout 4 related, as the game still sold well, and it was a pretty complete experience, but it did define a lot of them stuff going forward. At least in terms of Bethesda. They came out with Fallout 76 not long afterwards, and of course, things just kind of went kaplooey, and they ended up just releasing Starfield and getting bought out by that, and they didn't seem to be doing well with that. And overall, Bethesda has had some pretty big stinkers, though that doesn't mean that they aren't doing anything successful, as we'll come by to know in a more honorable mention later in the list. But It Just Works to me comes as the predecessor to some of the failures of Bethesda, and really goes to show more of what I think Bethesda can do when they say something stupid, but their product is actually ending up to be okay. But overall, I think that this is one of those things that just really kind of is fun to talk about. Again, it just works. Number 7. Call of Duty has no memorable characters. Vanguard.
I'm going to name the iconic COD characters, because you don't really have that in Call of Duty right now. You know, when you think about a game like Halo, you think of Master Chief or whatever, when you think of COD, there's really that standout, like, oh, these characters.
Yeah. This is another one that I put up onto this list because, again, the Call of Duty developers that were working on Vanguard made some pretty bad decisions with it, at least for me personally. Yeah, but being another personal one, what's the history of this? Call of Duty having no memorable characters from the Vanguard developers was said during a panel at Comic-Con before the game was to be released. This one is just kind of bad for several reasons, and instantly made me personally mad and not wanting to buy the game, because when they said that they have no memorable characters, I immediately thought of all the memorable characters, such as Soap, Roach, Ghost, Captain, Mason, Hudson, Reznov, and some of the other villains that I can't really remember, but you know what I mean. So I completely forgot. But they did have memorable characters throughout the whole series, is what I'm basically saying. Kind of turned me off to Vanguard immediately. And that was before I even saw any of the gameplay. This didn't really sell me on the game. It's not because the game was bad or it didn't even look really bad to me, I just didn't really want to support that. At least, again, more very personal, my problem reasons, having nothing to do with the game itself. And again, I didn't like the game look because at this point I was pretty turned off of Call of Duty from the previous Call of Duties just kind of being bad, as well as some people just mocking the historical accuracy, even though this is supposed to be a World War II shooter and they basically butchered guns in terms of gameplay mechanics to be fun and actively arcadey. If you're going to make a World War II shooter, I would recommend making more historically accurate things rather than not. Just saying. But it just felt wrong to see some of those games and good guns being butchered, in my personal opinion. But, again, c'est la vie. COD having no memorable characters goes on the number 7 list. But yeah. Anyway, next entry. Number 6. Do you guys not have phones? Diablo.
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
Oh yes, this out-of-season April Fool's joke was said by the reveal of Diablo Immortal, a free-to-play Diablo game for your iPhone. Because there is nowhere that I would rather play Diablo, a giant, massively multiplayer RPG, than on the toilet. For a while now, I debated as to where to put this one specifically, but given the fact that Diablo Immortal's game is fine and is okay as a game in and of itself, I decided to put it here towards the middle of the pack because, at the time, this was said in a room filled with Diablo fans who wanted a new Diablo game, not a new Diablo phone game. The specific one actually comes after a sarcastic quip, or not really a quip, but more of a genuine question of, is this game going to come to PC? Because that's where the majority of the audience wanted to know. And when they said no, they have no intention to, they then spouted out this line of, do you not have phones? Obviously, there is more to it than the story and the history of this game and stuff, but this was very much not a good look for a game company that at this time was more or less struggling. I believe this was Blizzard themselves, but I pan it to the Diablo developers as they were the ones who were giving the interview at the time. And yeah, all in all, it's not good to just, like, denounce an entire portion of your customer base. The people who want to buy your products. Just doesn't feel good to me. I don't know, maybe that's just my own thing. But at least they're doing at least somewhat better now. Maybe not great, but better than before. But yeah, overall, not a great line, and yeah, we have phones, but that doesn't mean that we all game on our phones. There's a difference. Anyway, next entry. Number 5. It's not gambling, it's surprise mechanics. Oh, yes. You knew that this was going to have to be somewhere on this list, and it's at the number 5, and cracking into the number 5 being EA. Oh, yes. I believe that this was supposed to be EA. I debated as whether or not this was EA or Ubisoft. Looking it up, it actually is attributed to EA because, well, it was during Battlefront 2, which was published by EA. The thing about this that actually ranks it higher than the most is, while most of the other ones were said to places such as panels of people, or were said to a majority of 1 to 2 individuals, kind of, sort of, this one was said to a group of politicians in France. At least I believe this was in French. This was actually said during the, not the interview, but during the process of litigation as to figure out whether or not the predatory microtransactions at the time when Battlefront 2 launched were actually legal to have in the game. And again, doing some of the math, you had to get a lot of hours into the game or spend a lot of money in order to actually get the characters that you might have wanted to play in the game. The mere gall of this entire company, or the representation of this company, to even say something like that, saying that it's not gambling but it's surprise mechanics, fills me to the brim with some kind of anger. Because yeah, gambling is surprise mechanics. Because you have no idea what the fuck to do. Because it's all luck-based. There's no skill or earnings things involved in it. It's disgusting, and frankly, was the antithesis of why we started to move away from loot boxes in the first place. Because people started to regulate them and realize, hey, we shouldn't get people addicted to this shit. Kinda just makes it feel weird. But it's lines like these that make me kind of want to be a fly on the wall during the entirety of the actual litigation of EA, to listen in on what they were trying to do to try and twist the words more. But this was definitely the antithesis of that. Definitely fun to talk about, and oh boy, did this make people fucking angry. Number 4. A lot of the shit that Notches said. Yeah, this one I mainly put on here for shock value because I can't really pin down a specific thing as to what Notch said that would be the worst to put on this list. So rather than just pick one, I'm going to be bending the rules just a little bit to say that anything that he has said that is, like, perceived as negative can go into this slot. As again, I don't really have anything specific here. One highlight that I did want to do while doing at least my research and stuff is that I ended up coming across one where he basically had a small falling out or had something to say to his former business partner C418, who was supporting, I believe, trans rights. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that Notch has said after he sold his share of Minecraft and got enough money to buy a country basically ended up kind of messing with his brain a little bit, because he basically achieved everything. He bought this $60,000 mansion and just lived alone for a while. I guess he just couldn't handle the pressure of it. I think that the H3H3 people who kind of went to one of Notch's parties at some point put it the best, where he looks like he became a shell of the former man that he once was. And again, given the amount of racist, homophobic, Nazism type stuff that he ended up putting out there into the world, yeah, that is... let's just not. With the whole talks of a supposed supposed Minecraft 2 or a Minecraft sort of game in the works now, this is basically going to be a lot of the stuff that comes back to bite him in the ass. And what's the worst part about this is he ended up being bad because he was once seen as a great person, someone who actually did have a good reputation. Goes to show you how much money can corrupt the soul sometimes. Number 3. Terrify your marketing team. Sweet Baby Inc.
Put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Ah, yes, this line. Now, while Sweet Baby Inc. is basically the punching bag for people, this one's more of a retroactively being bad, even though it was bad when it was said, but it made it worse as you continue to think about it. And still deserves a lot of the credit for what most people have heard about the initial company. Meet Kim Bel-Air, a CEO, or I believe the CEO or founder of Sweet Baby Inc., a consulting firm for inclusiveness and DEI protection. Now, during this sort of investigative stage of when finding out who the hell even Sweet Baby Inc. was, this line of Terrify Your Marketing Team was dug out from an actual panel that she gave at a specific conference somewhere. I don't think she actually ended up holding it, but I don't remember where specifically it was. Maybe it was CES, maybe it was somewhere else, but it was said to bring your marketing team out to a coffee and terrify them with the possibility of not using their services. Basically, using bullying tactics to get them to prosper, to get them to use your consulting things. I've made it very clear that I do not agree with this sort of marketing tactic, and I don't think most people in the marketing industry would agree with this. But I also find it just very dumb because of several different reasons. The main one being is that how did you do this initially when you had no one else that you were working with in that context? Maybe just terrifying marketing is a good business strategy, but that can only get you so far. I would argue I wouldn't trust someone with the track record that a lot of the Sweet Baby Inc. games have currently gotten. Things such as Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and in retrospect, looking back on the past, however, these tactics are still predatory and even deceptive at times, where it's like, oh yes, you will gain a lot more people by not going to your target audience? How does that make any sense marketing-wise? Anyway, as most of the games are now attached to them have basically failed, and frankly, I still believe that if you have to talk to a consulting firm about your art, you may need to reevaluate what art is and why this is dumb. Art is supposed to be a focus and supposed to say something, not just be pumped out there for the sake of making something. Make it something worth making. Number 2, if you want to play offline, buy a 360. Xbox.
And fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360. But stick with 360, that's your message. Well, if you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device.
Oh, yes, a classic. Said during the Xbox One reveal event, and said to a young Jeff Keighley, who would then go on to create the TGA Awards. The Xbone may have been not the most greatest of consoles, but serviceable in what it did. Was a terrible deal with a lot of the stuff outright, with a lot of the things said during that Xbox One event needing to be retracted in order for them to even make some pretty meh sales. Overall, this entire culture that this person had when they made this statement, whose name I've completely forgotten, I think he was again a higher up at Microsoft, he was promptly then not fired, but let go from his position and replaced with Mr. Phil Spencer here. Now, obviously, this is not the worst thing that Xbox has done, but overall, this one definitely hurt them and made them shift to their current business model from what I could tell. This was made during a time just after the 360, a time when more people cared about things such as physical games and needing the games to be at the forefront of playing it, wanting to play it at the best graphics and the best settings that they could possibly get on this sort of thing. The Xbox One launched and had no appeal and little to do about it. And when you're a person trying to sell the new product, saying, hey, if you want a better experience that you agree with or an experience that you want that we're not providing, go over and buy our old shit. That's not how you sell a new product, idiot. It's not how you do that shit. It's dumb. But yeah, it's like if I were running some sort of shop and I told you that the deli next door is better and has more varieties of meat, but shop here because I make my meat, in-house a lot more, and it's new meat. Like, I'm gonna go to the other deli to have more options. It's just how it works, dude. The console itself wasn't great, but that line definitely let a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth if they went out to buy one. Now, before we get into number 1, here are some honorable mentions. I pulled them from this article from Archaeopod, which was a collection of the dumbest quotes from former gaming execs, but I have a few of my own on this honorable mentions, mainly ones that I could not fit into this list for one reason or another. First of all, this game sinks. Earthbound. This was not really said by anyone, but this was a marketing campaign that was in Nintendo Magazine, and it was promptly called upon to say this is the reason why the game didn't do so well, is because they said that the game stinks. Also, the fact that it was a scratch and sniff advertisement, basically that smelled like ass. Yeah, no, don't. Very dumb. The Red Ring of Death is not real, said by Xbox's Peter Moore. This one's just stupid. Again, the specific quote is probably on screen right now, pulled from the article itself, but just denying that the Red Ring of Death was real, despite the fact that they had a bunch of different consoles that were coming back with the Red Ring of Death that happened to be there, and that it was reported on everyone by the media. Yeah, this is just a dumb thing to deny. Anything Jack Thompson ever said. Jack Thompson. This man just seemingly hated video games. Overall, I don't know what the hell his problem was or why the hell it should be anything important to be said about it. And he's not a gaming CEO, so I can't include him on this list. But you can't talking about the dumbest things people have said about video games without mentioning Jack Thompson at least once in the video. So here is his honorable mention here. Take the trophy and fuck off. The DS will not have no lasting impact. Phil Harrison. Yeah, the DS will have no lasting impact on the handheld gaming market, just like how the Game Boy itself was, completely dominated the handheld gaming market for forever, and that Nintendo was just very good at trying to, at least at the time, make better and better consoles, and it eventually led to the development of the Switch, which is one of the best-selling consoles of all time. So, yeah. Also, I believe that the DS is also in the top 10 of the most selling consoles of all time, so totally didn't leave a lasting impact, Phil. Totally didn't. Work more for your PS3 console, said by Ken Kataguri. Oh yes, this one was surprising to find. Talking about the PS3 console price tag, which at the time was fucking expensive for like 2006 money. Like early 2000s money was a lot less than it was now. They basically said like, oh yeah, we're just going to have it to where our console is more expensive. This way our customers can get more satisfaction when they buy the console. If you make the console less, that means more people get to buy it, which means you make more money, which means more people are then satisfied with your purchase. You don't need to make them work more for something that they want. Don't do that shit when it's talking about video games and stuff. It's very strange. We made this for a modern audience. Bethesda. Now, I couldn't include this on the main list because it was either between this line or the line that I included, which was the one about It Just Works. I put It Just Works on there and put this in the honorable mentions one because of the one quote per company thing. But I keep this here because it didn't have necessarily as big of an impact of It Just Works, because the reason that It Just Works gets its mention on the actual list is because Todd Howard made fun of it, and that puts it above this line, which was said by someone who I don't even know to remember their name of. Nor do I care. It was just a really cool, funny thing that happened, and this one just kind of a sad to see that happen. But hey, whatever. The first quadruple A game. Ubisoft. Skull and Bones. My goodness. The game that was forced to release by a fucking governmental body that invested in it. And it sucked major donkey balls. Like, I don't know what else to say. Saying you're gonna make a quadruple A game is fucking stupid. For people who may or may not know, AAA comes from the insurance thing, where AAA is like the best quality standard for a sort of service. Hence why the AAA gaming kind of coined that phrase and adopted it into their own ranks. So that's why making a quadruple A game seems kind of stupid, and only the fact that it not only flopped, but flopped so hard that it basically tunneled into the center of the earth. yeah, this is definitely getting a mention, but not really worth putting on the list as, again, I just couldn't fit it on there, unfortunately. Developers. Microsoft. This one's just a really stupid line. This one has nothing really to do with the gaming industry, I don't think, but it has something to do with Microsoft. I wanted to include this just so I could include the clip of someone being very sweaty on the stage and yelling developers over and over and over again. Just seems very weird. Also, like you might be on cocaine. So, I don't know. Sean Murray and the campaign with No Man's Sky. This was just sad. I didn't want to include it because at the end of the day, the game did make a very big and full recovery and is doing perfectly fine now. But that big old 2016 hype campaign for this entire game that went up onto it, only to then fall flat, is dumb. But I will give them this honorable mention just so I can say they may get the award for most valuable and improved game in the industry, because they went from literally the worst game put out of 2016 to possibly a great investment if you really want to play a very good kind of space game. Pretty neat. But okay, this time we're coming to number 1. And that is, oh yeah, they can do that, the Ouya.
But I argue that we are going to have inventive, creative, exclusive, innovative content that you aren't going to find on those devices because it's hard to bring those types of games to those devices. Minority Media is building a game that actually leverages, they built Papa, that actually leverages the buttons and the touchpad, right? Because our controller has a touchpad. You're not going to find that somewhere else. And the reality is...
The new PlayStation 4 controller has a touchpad.
It's true. They could build it for that.
So...
But they're building it for me, that's what I know.
Right. So,
yeah.
okay, but...
Oh, yes. You thought that I wouldn't just bring in just the big fish to top this list? Now, again, while some people might quarrel over this fact, the fact of the matter is I rated these based on my own personal scale of how they affected the games themselves and how they affected the industry overall, rather than specifically just the small games of which it happened. I think that you could argue that Skull and Bones was the start of the domino effect for Ubisoft's decline, but this line, which was said during the interview for the Ouya and what it brought to the table, overall, this line sunk an entire company. So, I don't really know how that can get any worse. And yeah, I know that I'm talking about an entire game company that wasn't having a proven stuff, but they hyped this thing up to no end, or at least they tried to. If you watch the actual full interview, it's very uncomfortable to sit through because the CEO just doesn't seem to know what she's talking about in that way. The console itself was basically a Raspberry Pi that seemingly just ran a lot of Android games and had its own, quantum network Ethernet system or whatever. The huge campaign was led to a even bigger letdown and literally closed the company. And the fact of the matter is, the person's actually working for the Playboy now, which, good for her. She sank a company with how little she seems to know, and not just the marketing, it was just strange. Sanity brought up one of the commercials, but the majority of the commercials were like that too, where they basically mocked the gaming industry for being so expensive and giving you the same garbage and slop, despite the fact that this just did the same thing on a smaller scale and was supposed to be for developers, but ended up being really bad. This is one also reason why things such as we only still have Sony and Xbox around because the Ouya just failed spectacularly, as well as, again, Nintendo, but Nintendo doesn't necessarily compete in the console wars. You also have to remember here that this was coming about around the time as the Xbox One and the PS4. So, proper game consoles with proper support and proper games coming out. So this really just failed to do anything innovative. Hence why the line "they can do that" comes from when she was asked about the controller having a touchpad on it. Because the PS4 also had a touchpad, and she didn't acknowledge it, she just said, yeah, they can do that, and I'm not sure about them actually doing it, but I know that I have it. Therefore, mine is better, I guess? Anyway, she just comes off as someone who doesn't know anything and has no idea what the hell that she's doing to run this company, and overall, that seems to have ended what happening. It baffles me that they delivered a product at all, but let alone one that adds some amount of money into it. If you want a deeper dive, check out Crazy Ken to actually get a fuller picture on the Ouya and how the actual history of it world. Frankly, I think he did a great job of it. Whew, okay, that probably is going to take a lot of time and editing to do, but my god, am I happy with how that came out. Overall, if you liked this sort of list thing, this is not necessarily what I'm going to be doing all the time, but I wanted to put this one out there because, quite frankly, there's just a lot of dumb stuff that gets spouted out across the entirety of the world, I guess, but this one right here was just one of the funny projects that I wanted to do. Overall, if you like what it is that I do, want to support me in any other way, shape, or form other than like and subscribe, which is always enough, please hit those links down in the description below. I also do things such as video editing on commission, as well as do art, because, you know, I have to keep myself creative juices flowing one way or another. But anyway, guys, my name is Campaign21, thank you again for watching, and a peace. Off.
Hey man, can I get a favor? Yeah, sure, I know.